Welcome back to the Craic, everyone. I hope all the crackheads are lit in the chat as always. It is UFC 310 fight week. The weigh-ins have just taken place, and there's a lot of things to talk about just on the back of that. Everyone, you'll be happy to know, in the main event and co-main event, all good. We did have two misses though from Brian Battle and Anthony Smith, so we're going to get into all of that as soon as possible. Of course, I've got some very esteemed guests here today. We're going to introduce them just in a couple of minutes. We're going to roll you some footage, as far as I know, as far as the beautiful on-air Jordan has told me, from the top two fights. So if we can,
let's the official weight for the champion Alexandre Pantoja.
Look at that body. Oh my God. That's what I look like with my top off. I swear to God. Let's see if we got Kaya Sakura here as well, because making 125 for the first time in 7 years. The Vibe King, as I like to call him. I love this guy. Cannot wait to see that fight tomorrow. But here, of course, the people's main event, Mr. Shavkat Rakhmonov on the scales there. What a man. A lot of Irish people making a lot of his head after Ian Garry's post. A very large head. They're saying, there's Ian Garry. Never was in doubt that that man would make 170. Very, very lean, as we know. And here they are. I can see their beautiful faces on my screen. It is the two legends, Chuck Mindenhall and Shaheen Al-Shatti of Uncrowned. Boys, I am delighted to see you again. How are you? Chuck, we'll start with you,
What's going on, man? It's fun to weigh in, if you will.
See what you did there.
Look at Sean. I've already got him squirming. This is like, we were like 2 seconds in. I got Sean squirming. It's good to see you guys. This is the second time we've done this. And this is kind of like the old show, isn't it, Petesy? We're talking about weigh-ins and kind of timing this out. I feel a little nostalgia here.
I just hope that we don't have the 7 hours that we had that time with Diaz and Shemaev and all that stuff.
Get Ant Evans on standby.
That's it. He better be there waiting for us. Al-Shatti, how are you, my friend? A big day of editing, I'm sure, with such a big event taking place this weekend. Oh, you got to unmute yourself.
Look at this guy. Jesus Christ. I don't know that I like how you teed that up. That felt somewhat insulting. Also, I would pay money to just listen to you, I guess, watch you sort of just overlay over weigh-in video. That was very entertaining.
That was good.
Yeah, well, it's going to get bad later on. I have a couple of ad reads, so I just want to warn the public. I'm only learning how to read now, so don't judge me too much. But I guess, lads, like, I'm very happy, I must say, that everything went well with that weigh-in. Shaheen, I was quite worried about Kaya Sakura. As I said there, I don't think he's made 125 for like 7 years, and he's coming in to this title fight, and I was like, oh no, this could be a terrible introduction. And I've loved everything he's brought to the table all week, so surely good news that he's at 124.5, I believe, making the weight at ease.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the big question, right? Like, it's one thing to debut in the UFC as a title challenger. Like, it's a very rare thing that we just generally don't see ever, and I think that speaks to the level of respect that is kind of being shown to Kai, like, and also probably the level of stardom that man holds over in the East. Like, it's just, we still can't really fathom and quantify it. It seems like just how big of a star this guy is in Japan. But that was sort of the big question, is like, this guy's hasn't done this for a very long time. So it is a risk, but man did it. Man pulled it off.
I'm very happy to see that. And Chuck, I don't know if you know this, Garry doesn't usually put on a lot of weight after he weighs in. Against Jeff Neal, he weighed 177 pounds, I believe. And I believe Neal was up around 195. Garry put out a post yesterday, and he had him and Shavkat facing off. I've cited this at the top. A lot of people, even when we put up the graphic for today's show, are like, wow, look at Shavkat's head. I didn't know this was a metric that we are weighing in on usually. But do you think, it's not something I ever thought about Shavkat, but do you see him as a much more imposing kind of physical guy than Garry ahead of this fight after seeing those weigh-ins?
I kind of see him the same. I mean, I've noticed the head thing before. I feel like, what are people watching? I mean, you know, in these face-offs and everything. But the dude it's funny because if you go back to his kind of original fights, the first couple fights in the UFC, I didn't really find him that imposing. He kind of came with a lot of hype. And I remember people were talking about he's undefeated fighter, all that stuff. But I don't remember him striking, like, looking imposing. It was like he was in there and he kind of looked aloof, if anything, and his body was not like super defined or, you know, yoked or anything. Like, he just looked like a normal guy. But I feel like over the course of time, especially going into that last fight and now into this one, you kind of see it, man. Like, you can tell that he's in better shape. He keeps getting in better shape. And I think that sometimes you kind of make your judgments based on the scale and how they comport basically as they face off and all that stuff. And I think he looks really good, man.
Yeah, it's certainly the people's main event. And one thing I wanted to ask you, Shaheen, is I think when this fight was announced, and I can remember people when this fight was announced, it was a lot of, and you get this with Ian Garry, he's a polarizing figure, right? They're like, oh, finally, someone's going to shut him up, all this kind of stuff. But as the fights got closer, I think there's a lot more people going like, this guy has a real chance. This guy could really pull this off against Shavkat. I know I was on with the boys in the back yesterday, and Rick shut me down immediately. I was just going through my 25 minutes of point striking his way to victory for Ian Garry. But do you think that sentiments have grown fonder in terms of Ian Garry's chances in this fight as the week has progressed?
It's an interesting question. I think like it's always hard for us, right? Because we're so inside the bubble. Like all of this is so insular that like it's hard to get a real sense of like how what people feel aside from the Twitter sphere and like Instagram and just the general comment section. I mean, Ian Garry has just been a very unlikable man, it seems like, for a long time for this fan base, right? Like we've just seen this man over and over get booed out of the building, and just and he does it to himself too. Like he'll put on last couple fights haven't been super impressive, and he'll come out and say that was the best thing that I've ever done with the MVP fight, etc. I will say though, man, I think that the balls it takes to do what he's doing, right, to step in against Shavkat, to openly call for Shavkat even before that, and just really be the one guy in this entire division calling to fight this boogeyman, this genuine boogeyman with 100% finishing rate, who's just tearing through everybody in ferocious, frightening fashion, to openly just be asking for this and then get it and embrace it. And really this whole week, I think he's really stepped up to the task at hand, just of really promoting this. And again, just re-emphasizing over and over, like, I don't care how the sparring went, like this is a different thing. All the people in the rest of this division are chickens, like just going up and down with what this guy's been doing. And I will say also doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down on the Colby thing of just really putting out there of like, Colby is a coward because of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And just going deep into that. Well, it does feel a little bit, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys feel otherwise, it feels like kind of fan sway is swaying a little bit on his side, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has not come off in the way that he has historically in the past. He has not done that this week, I think.
I think self-belief, like what you're kind of talking about, is a huge selling point for him, man, because he could have easily sidestep this. I mean, when you talk about a guy like Colby Covington, and I'm not trying to like throw shade at just like Colby, but it's just hard math. Every time they're trying to get a match made for the guy, and I know he's stepping up in the situation in Florida, all that stuff, but just traditionally, it's very difficult. There are champions where it's very difficult to book. There are certain guys that nobody wants to face because the juice isn't worth the squeeze or the risk outweighs the reward. I feel like for him, he just doesn't care on that. And I have to give him huge props for that, man, because there weren't a lot of people pining for a match against Shavkat. It just feels like a sentence, and it puts you back behind the eight ball, especially for a guy like Garry, whose primary concern, I would guess, would be the title. What would be the most ridiculous thing for you to do is to triple on the way against the juggernaut who looks dog-eared for that title, right? Like this is one of those situations you're like, maybe you avoid him until you're holding the title. I can appreciate it, man. I think that it's one of those things that for all the people, who kind of criticize him and scrutinize him and cringe at him and all that stuff, this stuff goes a long way for the integrity of the fight game, and for him, I think it just shows kind of how much self-belief he has in himself,
Yeah. No, I agree with what you guys are saying, but I guess the one thing that, and look, you both mentioned it there as you're speaking about this fight, like, there's massive title ramifications here for the winner of this fight, either Shavkat or Ian. What I want to know is, Shane, do you think either of these can make a massive banner marquee for a fight with Bilal for the UFC? I think that's something that we know the UFC want to make the biggest fights possible. These two are fighting for number one contender spots. What is the bigger fight? Let's take Bilal's opinion of who he'd do better against. Like for the UFC, what is the bigger fight here?
Why you gotta tee me up to crap on Bilal? I don't want to crap on Bilal. I like Bilal. We did a.
You're always doing it in the Slack, Sean. I mean, you're like all the time on there crapping on Bilal. So why not do it here on live here?
We did like a welterweight fantasy draft way back in the Man of the Myth days, and I think I picked Bilal even back then when he wasn't
yes, you
even
did. You've
close
always been
to this type of level.
Yes.
I've always respected that man. But the question of like if either of them makes a big fight with Bilal, like obviously not. Like we know the answer to that. You know the answer to that when you ask me it. I think probably Shavkat right now is the bigger fight with Bilal, just because the Shavkat aura is so extensive and overwhelming and just all consuming, frankly. But man, like a lot of change can happen on fight night, right? If Ian Garry comes in here and backs up everything he said and just comes in and really does something to Shavkat that no one else throughout the history of the world has been able to do to Shavkat, and stuns the world and lives up to every word that he promised. Like we come out of Saturday night thinking of Ian Garry differently, right? Like we come out of Saturday night thinking of this man as the truth, as the future, if you want to go with the name tag, right? Like it's crazy how things can change in a matter of an hour in this sport. But if Ian Garry goes in there and backs it up, I think that he comes out genuinely like on the precipice of actual stardom, because the man can talk, the man can own a mic. Like it was very cool seeing him speak the Portuguese at the press conference and just sort of do, again, the way he's navigated this fight week. I've been very impressed by. And Pete, I almost want to ask you just quickly, like, we've seen historically, like the Ian Garry relationship with Ireland is not there in the same way that it was with Conor, right? And it was with even just past other Irish fighters. It's just, it hasn't been the same. What is it going into this fight? Like, is there excitement for it in the country? Is it just kind of like being overlooked? Is it being ignored? Like where does sort of Ireland sit right now with Ian Garry, as we sit on the precipice of something where, again, this could change the direction of his career dramatically?
Well, I think it's something that's promising. Is I know he was featured in mainstream outlets this week. He was on a big drive time show, I think yesterday. It's called Game On, big sports show, kind of previewing all the things this weekend. So it was great, and he was his usual extroverted, jovial self. Like came across very well from what I heard of the show. Um, so that was that's on the national broadcasting. He was also featured on Joe, which is a really popular website between the like 18 to 35 demographic. He was featured on there speaking about how he's going to paint a beautiful picture with Shavkat's blood. A lovely message to send, of course. But the real issue,
disgusting, by the way.
this is blood sport. But the problem he's going to have is just the general perception of MMA in Ireland now, and the shadow that McGregor has cast over it. Like, I mean, you've been helping me with all of the stuff that's coming out of the courts the last month or so, Shaheen. Judges are speaking the way McGregor's own counsel is speaking. Like it's clear that this is a massively polarizing guy. So I think that's really the biggest issue here. Already Irish fans had a problem relating to him from the get-go, and I think that a lot of that was driven by the fact that he was praising McGregor every time he was given a mic. He was like, this guy is the greatest, and look, he's his hero. Like there's no doubt about that. That's all genuine. Ian was inspired to fight because of Conor McGregor, but the problem is the casual sports fan hears his name and they're turned off to a large degree. So it's a massive monumental task, I feel, for an Irish person to stimulate that casual sports interest that we've seen with the likes of McGregor and that generation of fighters, to be fair. Because back then, if Carl Pendred's fighting in Mexico, people are staying up. If Neil Siri is fighting in Stockholm, everyone's staying up. Ash Daly, the rest of them, like it became a real thing. And MMA was covered alongside the biggest sports in the world. It's still there. It will still be featured in papers tomorrow. It's previewing the fight, and then on Monday's papers they'll be there as well. It might be a conversation point on some radio shows, but really, you never know you're in the good old days when you're in the good old days. And
I felt like we knew in McGregor's day, though. We did know that one.
Yeah. It was 2014 to 2017, I guess, culminating with the Mayweather fight. I think that was probably the peak it will ever be here. And it's a really, really difficult task for anyone to be tasked with getting this sport back to a mainstream spot. Right now, we've got Paul Hughes, who's fighting Nurmagomedov, obviously very soon in Dubai, and we have Ian. But I think that's a lot to put on them, dude. I really, really do.
You know what's crazy is I think that, just going back to the original question, I do think that Garry would obviously translate better in terms of, like, if you're looking at who's next for Bilal for marquee purposes, like, but that's only because he's a polar and an old structure kind of fighter, like a guy who kind of draws attention, polarizing whether you like him or not. You kind of care about this dude, where he's going, so you're going to pay attention. But this is such a blood-dimmed tide for the meritocracy at this moment, isn't it? It's like you get a moment right now where you're talking about Bilal being the dangling carrot, a guy who we didn't think would ever get a title chance, much less wear the belt. And now you get guys like Rakhmonov, who in terms of just what we look for in fighters, like obviously he's a finisher, but he doesn't bring much in terms of charisma, or he doesn't, he's not gonna speak English to you and like do all the the things that we're familiar with. Yet you have a potential of those two guys fighting, and it's fascinating. This is almost like the diehards delight. We're kind of steering in that direction, especially with the announcements of UFC 311. With Umar versus Marab, and Artem Sarukian going against Islam, right? Like these are all meritocracy fights. And it's like I love that aspect, because it is rare that you get heaps of momentum going at each other again and again. So many times in the sport, you have a guy like Miocic, for instance, or somebody kind of grandfathered into a spot, or somebody jump in the queue like Colby Covington or whatever it is. And you kind of have to just kind of ride through it while somebody gets killed off in that process usually. But this is one of those rare moments in MMA where you're really catching the best versus the best. And I got to say, I can appreciate that.
I think that's a great point. And also I'll speak more broadly to that, like with Shavkat, right? Because Shavkat, to me, like obviously there's a ceiling on whatever Shavkat can become for the UFC, just in terms of stardom and like the interest that he draws from like a mainstream public eye. It's like you said, Chuck, the charisma and the lack of English and just like all of that kind of caps the level that I think this man could probably get to. Like he's never going to be Alex Pereira out here, just be having this legion of adoring fans. But it does feel, I do feel like there is something there with him that is special in its own way. And like again, that aura and just the aura of invincibility and terrifying nature of this man feels like it does seem like it could translate and transcend boundaries to some extent, right? If he's able to say, do what he normally does, pull off a Jeff Neal to Ian Garry and standing choke this man and just, take the O from Ian Garry in really violent fashion, and then go and do that to Bilal Muhammad as well. And all of a sudden this guy is the guy at the top of the heap. This guy with a 100% finishing rate who just leaves a trail of dead bodies at his wake. Like that's the dude that you have to meet at the top of the mountain. That's the Shang Tsung. That's the Shao Kahn that you're climbing the mountain to get to. Like at a certain point, I feel like that would translate, would become like actual appointment viewing for, if not the UFC, like obviously the UFC fan base, but just, at some point, like a Habib became a big star. Habib had English, Habib had the Conor thing, but like, you don't have to just be that traditional fighter to translate often or always, if you have a level of dominance to go along with it. And feel like Shavkat can be that guy. Like he can be, there's that potential in there. There's that ceiling in there. It's not, I don't think the ceiling is as capped as people maybe have been assuming it is.
And there's something to be said about like levels of mystery at some point in this game, because it 100%. used to be, you had this all the time, long before social media, and people could just advertise themselves and brand themselves and all these things. You dealt in their mysteries, and it was sort of an unveiling as you went. Like you kind of understood who these people were as time went on. I kind of feel like in that way, it's fun because he comes from a region of the world a lot of people, especially in North America, don't know much about. The hats, just the style, the attitude, the fact that he doesn't really emote all that much. But yet sometimes, like when he finishes his last fight, he gets up and he starts peeling off money like he's, and I'm like, okay, there's layers to this dude. We just don't know him yet. And I think sometimes that can be, it can be one of those things that it dawns on you as it goes too. And sometimes the mystery is a good thing, but sometimes don't you kind of crave that? I don't know much about this guy. Let's find out about him. To me, that's one of the fun aspects of him.
Never underestimate a fun hat. Never underestimate a fun hat in MMA. The power of the fun hat at MMA is undefeated, my friend. If you have a fun hat and you're able to pull off consistent,
didn't the boys in the back just do a hole?
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
people eat it up.
Yeah. I love it.
Well, Chuck's whole career, like he has no talent whatsoever. It's just the hats. I've always been telling him.
I've never had a talent. I've never written anything yet. I have an AI thing that does that, but I mean, it's cool. The hat, it works. I mean, it sells.
You're killing it, man. And before we move on, we just need to take a brief word from our partners, NordVPN. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/unground. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. See the link down below. Why use NordVPN, you might ask? Well, let me tell you. Protect your private data like bank details, passwords, and online identity. NordVPN can switch your virtual location, allowing you to save money by purchasing flights, hotels, subscriptions from other countries at a cheaper rate. Protect your data while traveling and using public Wi-Fi. NordVPN protects you wherever you are in the world. NordVPN's threat protection features protects you from viruses, malicious malware, and phishing sites. It's the fastest VPN in the world. No buffering or lagging while streaming, and stops your ISP bandwidth ISP bandwidth throttling. One NordVPN account can be used on up to 10 devices. Get premium cybersecurity for the price of a cup of coffee per month. There you are, NordVPN. What a great bunch of lads. I mean,
you stuck the landing, man. Look at you. I knew you could do this. This is, and let me just tell the people at home. Can I say this? I'm going to break down the fourth wall. Like, this was the only thing giving him stress about this, is he had to do an ad read. And look at that. He kills it. What a pro.
Well, I had to, after the last time we had to do one of these, I had to read my own article, which I somehow flummoxed 8 times. And I could see the comments after, like, wow, Petesy can't read. And I'm like, I'm starting to agree with the crackheads.
And that's the shit he wrote.
But let's get back to the fights, lads. Big misses before we move on to what fights we're excited outside of those top 2, which everyone's buzzing for. Big misses from, well, particularly from Brian Battle, 175, and did not look good on the scales at all. We have a picture up there from On Air Jordan, as you can see, fairly sucked in. You know, and Battle has had a history with this as well. This is not his first rodeo in terms of missing weight. Is this a killer one for not a killer one, but like after the France thing, I feel like he was everyone's sweetheart, and then this happens, and obviously Randy Brown there, 171. We still don't know if this is a health issue. We're probably gonna wait till later on the day to find out, make sure everything's still going ahead. But is this a bad look for a guy who seemed so high coming off Paris, Chuck?
Yes. I mean, we did a piece. Sean knows. I mean, I was like, I got to write about Brian Battle, because to me, that was one of the great mic drops we've seen this year, where he just kind of incites that crowd into a violent state. They're just yelling and booing, and he's like, give me it all. You know, to me, that's the great, you know, cinema that we look for outside the fight, right? Like, if you're going to use a microphone, use it well. This was his moment. I feel like, I know he was on Ariel's show. There's a lot of eyes on him, and this was the one thing you can't do. You can't, like, you know what I mean? You can't miss weight on the moment when everybody seems to pay attention to you and wants to see what's the next phase. And I mean, seriously, you tell me, guys, I felt like he was nearing the verge or the cusp, I guess, of becoming a star in this game. That's how it felt to me. And now I'm like, I don't know. We'll still see how it all plays out, but that's a bad one, man. That's a bad miss.
I think star is probably maybe a little overselling it, but he was certainly on the cusp of becoming someone who, like, a main player, right? Like, breaking out of that UFC anonymity to a certain degree, right? Like, this is a guy who's been putting in the work since 2021, like 6-1 in the UFC, 6-1 with no contest in there. Like, he really was on the precipice, and I would say still is on the precipice of, like, really, again, breaking out of, like, it's so difficult to just get people to remember your name in this sport because of the deluge of content that we have in Contender Series guys and just all the various like machinations in this current day of the UFC. It takes so much for people to just even remember your name to a certain degree, right? And he was there. He still is there, but it's just like it feels like so often we get these moments where like guys are just in that exact moment, and then something dumb like this happens, or just like they can't live up to the moment in that way that we want them to. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, it seems like the fight's still going to go on forward, and if Brian goes out there and, you know, does something spectacular and cuts another killer promo, well, I'll spin my case. Hey, by the way, sorry for missing weight, but then, you know, cut some awesome promo. Like, we'll be right there back with him, and whether it leads to a move up in division or he's going to try again, like, I think people will still ride with it, but it is disappointing.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. Like, I can remember, I used to often think about, you know, he came in from Tough, I believe, and Garry was, you know, obviously doing great in the UFC, and they kind of had a back and forth. I think Battle lost the fight, and he felt very much out of that conversation. But on the back of Paris, I was like, wow, he's picking up momentum. Like, these guys could be around this title conversation at the same time. Have to see how the UFC reacts to this. But I will say, when you
real quick though, the last time he missed weight, didn't he like smoke the guy? It was like in Charlotte. and in his hometown, and he smoked the guy in like inside of like 12 seconds or something like that.
Are you saying this is a tactical miss? Is that what you're saying, Mindenhall?
Yes, I'm saying keep an open mind. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's yeah, he's look, I think he's, as I said, came on an awful lot. UFC don't like that shit though, obviously, you know, especially when you're talking about guys in the title mix. They want someone that's ironclad. Like, remember all of the conversation about Hamzat at 170, Davis and Figueiredo at 125. I mean, the list can go on with guys who, Kelvin Gastelum, every time he fought, we were just like, oh God, how's he going to do here? Brian Battle, not quite Kelvin Gastelum just yet, but you know, he needs to not miss again.
Well, don't book him around Thanksgiving, all right? How about that?
That's a good idea, actually. Oh,
I think he said he skipped Thanksgiving dinner, though. I think he said that, but
he's lying. He's lying too. He's a liar, clearly. And he's tactically missing weight. But that's what we have discovered on the Craic this week. Shaheen, are you surprised by Anthony Smith missing? 207.5 here for his fight against Dominic Reyes. He was the last guy to hit the scales. Are you surprised at all by that? The former middleweight Anthony Smith coming in heavy?
Real quick, I got to give a shout out to Tyson Uppercuts in the chat, which is the comment of the day. Thumbs up in the chat. First of all, thumbs up in the chat. Sorry, thumbs up in the chat. I know y'all didn't think the Butcher was going to make weight for this fight. I know y'all didn't think the Butcher was going to make weight for this fight. Gotta love it.
I love it. I love it.
Fair play. Fair play.
Anthony Smith, a little surprised by, but I mean, if you've heard him speak at any point this week, it does feel like this was a difficult one for him, and he experienced a loss very recently in his life, and so God, it seemed like he's using this week and this fight in particular as a chance to sort of channel some of that anger and get some of that violence and aggression out right now. So, you know, that's one of those where like this guy has done it for so long. He's such a professional on every level in this game. Like sometimes you give guys a pass, and in this one, honestly, I give Anthony a pass. It does seem like this was a very difficult camp for him, just emotionally.
Yeah, and I don't think he's missed weight before, has he? Like he's been around forever. I don't recall, if he has, I don't recall him missing weight before. So it's just a complete anomaly. And you got to think that there was some circumstance that created this, right? Like he's usually such a professional.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd have to give him the benefit of the doubt here, and benefit of the doubt. And obviously, what Shaheen said there, a very, very tough camp for him. We saw him talk about that at the media day, of course. Lads, obviously everyone's buzzing for these top two fights, and we've talked about them to death all week on this fantastic channel. But before I get into it, because everyone knows what mine is, I've been talking about it all week. What is your favorite fight outside of those top two, Chuck?
Outside of the top two, probably the Evloev fight, only in the sense of I love the chip on the dude's shoulder. I think it's funny that you kind of have the black sheep versus the pariah in this situation. Like you have two guys that the UFC is sort of like and just put them on the prelims. One's a former champion, the other guy's been 8-0 in the UFC. It's a crazy stylistic matchup. There's a lot of like subtext through this fight. I see Evloev also as a guy who's probably the biggest threat to Ilia Topuria. So like even though he's kind of being submerged on the prelims, there's this feeling of like, well, eventually, right? And we're just talking about like the meritocracy being what it is. Eventually he's going to have to break through and be in that conversation too. There's just a lot to love about a fight like that. It might not be the most it's going to be a tactical, it's a very skillful fight, but it may not be the best entertainment. And I think both guys are well aware of that, and therefore they may try to make it more entertaining. You know what I mean? So there's just compelling features to that fight that I really like.
Shane, what about you, man? What are you looking forward to?
I mean, look, like obviously on its merits, it's that fight, right? Like that fight realistically should be on this main card. I kind of understand everyone's narrative with that in that sense of like, this is ridiculous that it's not. And what are we actually doing here? Like Aljamain Sterling is not a prelim fighter, and it's very bizarre to see him in that spot if it's not a UFC 103 style card. And like, I respect Chuck for his opinion and pick there, because again, that's probably the correct pick.
But
like we're all a bunch of ridiculous savages here. We're all a bunch of morons who just want to see people punch each other in the face. And you got Nate the Train Landwehr sitting
that is
on
the
this
one,
main
though.
card, and you're not gonna pick that guy, the most entertaining man of the game. I know y'all didn't. I was gonna try to cut a Brian Battle, but didn't work out. It's Nate the Train versus Doo Ho Choi, man. Like this, first of all, Doo Ho Choi is already a UFC Hall of Famer. Like while competing,
that's pretty wild, isn't it?
That's pretty wild.
Yeah,
it's pretty wild. But man, every time Nate's out there, like he is just an absolute maniac. I remember the first time I talked to Nate Landwehr, and normally I would never do what I'm about to do, but I can almost guarantee that he would absolutely not care. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it. It was when me and you were still at the Athletic, Chuck, and we were doing that anonymous fighter survey. Do you remember that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so we at our whole team, we talked to like 200 fighters across the game, almost just anonymously asked them a bunch of different questions, like very serious questions about pay and how the UFC treats them and things like that, but also very dumb questions about like, you know, who's your favorite referee, who's the worst referee,
right,
et cetera, et cetera. And one of the categories of questions was like in terms of MMA rules, like what do you think about the specific MMA rules, and more specifically, what would you like to see not banned? And among that group was eye gouges, groin shots, things like this. It's small digit, like finger and toe manipulation. And so we asked 200 people these questions of like, hey, do you want people to be able to hit you in the balls? Do you want people to be able to scoop out your eyeballs? I think almost nobody, I think it was like 199 of those 200 said no to those specific questions. Who do you think was the one that said yes?
Nate Landwehr.
My man. I asked these questions to Nate Landwehr, and he's like, "Yeah, of course I won't hit guys."
Wait, I said eye gouging. Did you hear me, Nate? Eye gouging.
He is a lunatic. He's the best kind of fight game lunatic on the planet. Like this, people like Nate Landwehr are why this game is so much fun, because you can get characters like him. You can get a character like an Ian Garry, who's just a fight IQ genius, who's going to go out there and point fight. But then on the same night, you can see Nate Landwehr try to, go Keith Hackney on some of these dudes. Like I'm here for that. And also like the story of Doo Ho Choi is so forever just interesting to me, right? Because this kid comes up very young, very explosive, and just like is really making a mark very early in his career. Seems like he's on the precipice of really becoming like a legitimate title contender, and then has that Hall of Fame fight with Cub Swanson. And again, already a Hall of Famer. I was at that fight. That was one of the most incredible scenes I have ever been at, just like live to watch.
That crowd was so into every punch. It was crazy. Yes,
unbelievable, unbelievable stuff. And then he just kind of disappears completely, just falls off the map because of the South Korean military service. And ever since he came back, it has not been the same, right? Like he has just not been able to refine that momentum. And now it feels like maybe he's gotten there. Maybe he's sort of found something within himself again, and it's summoning it back. But also maybe not, because you're about to run into Nate the Train. So like I love everything about this fight, and I just can't wait for it.
Wow. And that if you haven't seen the Onama fight with Nate Landwehr, you gotta go watch that. The dude is almost decapitated in the first round. I mean, like it's a 10-8, right? If I'm recalling this correctly, it was like Onama was like the huge favorite. He takes it to him, and somehow the tides turn in this fight, and then Landwehr at the end. It was just one of those crazy things where you're like, how in the hell is he still standing, much less kind of building momentum towards the end of that fight? That was a ridiculous example of what you're saying about how sadistic and how deep he runs, man. And by the way, there's a guy in Phoenix, Estevan. What was his name? Do you know what I'm talking about? Estevan. We talked to him in the survey too, and he was the other guy. So you mentioned that there was at least one or two guys. He was the other guy, because I interviewed him. I asked him about eye gouging. He's like, "Yeah, it's a fight, man. It's a fight. This should be involved."
Oh my god. I love that fight too, the Doo Ho Choi one, and Landwehr. But I will say, like, you've made me kind of sidestep here, Al-Shatti, because obviously I was going for that one as well. But I love the Cyril Gane and Volkov is very interesting to me.
No, you don't.
He loves it.
I really like it.
I feel like Cyril Gane's setting himself up for a title fight here. I'm just going to throw
that out.
That's
the issue, right?
Yeah.
Like, Gane. Everyone's just looking at this fight, going like, "Oh yeah, Gane is gonna fight Tom here. Jones thing won't happen, and Cyril Gane will be right there." But Volkov's been on this tear, lad. Since being stopped by Aspinall, and I was at that fight. Stopped Jairzinho Rosenstruck, Alexander Romanov, Taito Ivasa, and Sergey Pavlovich. Well, didn't stop Sergey. He got a decision win. I think he's a live dog too. Like, look, I'm going with Cyril, no doubt about it, but he's been out for a long time. Volkov looks like a different fighter. He's an incredibly awkward dude. Like the size of Volkov alone, so hard to
like
get around.
6'8", right, or something like that.
Yeah, when he gets that jab going, it's just a nightmare to deal with. I've seen him just jab the face off dudes. It can be horrific, and of course we know that Cyril likes that style of fight at distance, coming in and out, very very slick. I think that's a really really interesting fight too. We need to talk about Chuck's record here.
Hold on, real quick.
Thank you.
Real quick tangent before we glaze Chuck for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, at least 5.
At least 5. among like the ranks of former Bellator champions who we don't consider former Bellator champions, is Alexander Volkov number one? Because I feel like no one at all thinks of that guy as a former Bellator champion. Because like when we talk about these guys, we always qualify
that
them,
never
right? Like
crosses my mind.
Michael Chandler, 3-time former Bellator champ. Even like Eddie Alvarez, right, who became UFC champion, former Bellator champ. Like we always just qualify it with these type of things. It feels as if no one knows that Volkov was the former Bellator champ, but I can't think of a similar comparison to that, just in the way that we sort of see them.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
As soon as you said that, I was like, "Oh shit, yeah." I didn't even think about it.
I swear I hadn't thought about that in a long ass time. So like that tells you right there. Like you just kind of forget. But he's had a ton of fights, and this is, the best. I would say that this is the best he's looked, right? Over because he's won the 4 in a row, but he would kind of have these hiccups, or he would let down his guard. The Lewis fight back when that happened, where at the very end, he gets clobbered and snatches defeat from the jaws of victory type thing. I feel like he's put it all together. So it is an interesting point, and it almost feels like the Bellator thing was such a different lifetime ago for a guy like that, because I think he's evolved and everything else. But it is a crazy thing that you mentioned that, because I have not thought of him that way since 3 or 4 years ago. It's been a long time.
Yeah, that was the Bjorn Remney era. Like he is a relic. He has been around this game for so long, and like we said, like he is now sort of coming into his own, right? Like reaching his final form. It's heavyweight's such a different beast than the rest of these light.
Do you guys see the word Mexico every time you say Bjorn Remney? I still see it. Mexico.
Yes,
I still see that.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. It's a rematch, of course. He beat him back in 2021.
Can't wait for John Jones versus Cyril Gane too.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
It's he's got a new haircut as well, Volkov, which should be noted. A far more floppier kind of thing going on, bit of an overlap I've noticed. And we got to remember too, and this is something that's swept under the carpet, not swept under the carpet, something that's forgotten about the Aspinall fight. And not that the fight would have went different. I'm a big Aspinall mark, but that was when Russia was basically closed off. Do you remember the adventure he had to go on to get to London that time? It was crazy.
That's right.
He went through 8 different countries to get to London. Like by the time he hit the media day, we were like, "How did you get here?" And he's like, "Honestly, man, I don't actually know what way I went to get here," because he's just like on different flights. Some people would take him. Some countries would take them in. Some people wouldn't. Absolutely insane stuff. Are we gonna get to the Mindenhall glazing section?
Probably not, because Sean's probably like, "Oh no, wait, let's address this other thing first." He's gonna try to avoid it.
Let me set this up here, because so Al-Shatti, our fearless editor at Uncrowned, we all do the picks. There's about 8 of us, 10, maybe 10 of us. How many of us are doing the picks, Al-Shatti? About that, but 10.
I don't have an answer for that. Come on.
8 or 10.
We're going to see the graphic in a second anyway. And he said,
it's just one guy and a bunch of duds, if we're saying what it is. I mean,
but this is insane.
How dare you speak about Mysterious Frank in that way?
12
his record's like four and
only man with the losing record on this whole team.
Mysterious Frank.
The difference between first place and second to last place is minimal compared to the difference between second to last place and Frank. It's wild.
But Chuck, you get your roses here, man. If anyone's gambling, form would say, go with whatever Mindenhall is putting down on paper.
Been this way for years. Yeah.
I don't know if you heard what Al-Shatti said to me about this. He said, he's definitely going to slip up soon. He can't keep this perfect record going.
I did say that.
With that said, Jordan, let's have a look at these picks here, because the man with the golden hand, what is he going for here? This is incredible.
Gentlemen, start your parlays. Here they are, right here.
This is incredible. We have some very different picks here, Chuck, as well, I must say. I for some reason cannot get this graphic. I cannot see this. I'll try my best. I'll have to get nice and close. But where Chuck Bendel? I'm sorry, boys. Like,
do you not know how to pin one of the Zoom tabs?
I don't know how to pin this. You know what I mean?
You don't know that.
I've pinned it, but it's not big enough. But anyway, Chuck Mindenhall, 12-0. Who's he going with? He is going with, in the main event, Pantoja. In the co-main event, he's going with Rakhmonov.
That's right.
He's going with Gane. He's going with Mitchell. And he's going with Landwehr.
Your face is so close to the computer. People can't see how close to your face is.
I think I have the graphic on my phone that I'm going to have to go to instead of this. Interesting.
Oh, man.
I've picked different to you. I'm 10-2. I think it's a respectable
Where did you
Respect for it.
differ here? I can't see the graphic. It's like a tiny little box.
Now
Yeah.
everyone can't see the graphic. Okay, so let's not. You know what I mean? It's not just me.
I
We're
shouldn't
all
have
old
said
men.
that.
We
I
can't
shouldn't
see.
have said that. Now go ahead,
Um,
but tell me where you differ on this.
Well, I went for a vibe selection in the main event.
Okay.
Pure vibes.
That's hipster stuff. What else?
This is. I'm actually using your theory here, Chuck. Everybody is saying Pantoja. As soon as you start talking about this guy, is this the guy the greatest? Is this guy the most underrated? Shouldn't we all just love this guy
Pantoja
more?
that space? I guess
People are not saying is he the greatest, right? Like that's not an
he's
actual conversation.
Well, they're saying where does he rank in the pantheon? And I'd say a lot
they're
of people
saying
would have
things
him.
like he's a pretty good flyweight. You know, no, I'm kidding. They're giving him more praise. It's somewhere in the middle of what we're talking
They're
about.
giving him below. They're arguing should he be just below Demetrius, right? Like
Right.
that is the conversation.
Yes.
Like, is he the next
say
in
that's
line
fair.
under Demetrius as flyweight greats? Al-Shatti disagrees with this immediately. I've
Well, he'll
noted
get-
that.
No, I mean, I think there's a conversation there. Probably.
I think he's the only guy to defend the belt twice outside of DJ, right? Like, I don't think anyone. I think, like, what's he had 11.
I mean,
fights?
Figueiredo had 2 over the course of like the reigns, but he had like
that's
so many
right.
breakups in between, right?
But
So
he
it's
had the
like,
win and then a draw with Moreno, right?
yeah.
So
Well, draws
like-
count as a
it's a
retention.
defense,
but-
yeah. It's a defense, not wins though, right? We like wins here. Pantoja
Yeah.
wins. I'm
Right.
giving him the edge. But I have gone for Asakura here, saying all
Okay.
of that
All
and these
right.
great things about him.
You-
I've gone for Asakura.
It's gonna be huge. It's gonna be a lot to overcome. Like he looked big already. I'm like, he's gonna be
He's like
huge.
5'8"
I know.
for a flyweight. That's
Yeah.
insane. Now I could nearly see his beating heart while he was on the scales. To be honest, he looked like a White Walker or something. But yeah. So I've gone for him, and I've gone for Choi against Landwehr, which I think I'm regretting. Again, just a massive Choi.
That was the
fan.
hardest one for me.
Yeah, the line's very close as well, isn't
Yeah.
it?
I kind of went back and forth on that one, but there's everything that Sean just detailed. I was like, that was the reason. I was like, nah, I'm not gonna pick against Landwehr in this fight. I just feel like he'll be willing to die, especially at the curtain. What do they call it? The curtain jerker when the first fight. They want to set they want to set the table for the rest of the night. I feel like he's gonna bring the fireworks.
Y'all silly. Y'all silly. I see Nate Landwehr. I picked Nate Landwehr. Easy. Took
True.
me 2 seconds.
Tell me what what do you differ from Chuck or I here? What are your picks, Al-Shatti?
I mean, I don't know that I differ very far. It feels like a lot of us were pretty,
Yeah, this one
aligned
was-
with a lot of these picks,
Yeah.
right? The one that was most difficult for me was honestly the main event, because I like Kai Asakura is a mystery man for a lot of people, but I don't know. I've really enjoyed him for a long time. Like
Mhm.
he's a very violent man, and he took like very good use, or he applied very good use of the Japanese skill set, or I'm sorry, rule set in terms of the allowances that allow with grounded knees, stomps, soccer kicks, things like that. Like that man, supremely violent with his knees and kicks in that respect. So like he's a little bit hamstrung over here with the Western rule set. But man, I am just so fascinated with what he could become if he becomes this guy. Because again, I said it at the top of the show, like we just really do not fathom how popular this man is in over in Japan. Like if you look at his YouTube channel or his brother's YouTube channel is even bigger than his YouTube channel. He's almost like the Jake Paul to his brother's Logan Paul in that sense, where like he's the less famous brother, but he's probably the more successful brother just in terms of the fight game. Our own Drake Riggs wrote a phenomenal piece essentially detailing this week of like who is Kai Asakura and like his road and things like that. Like there is not a fighter with a social presence that sort of matches Kai Asakura in like championship contention right now in the UFC, just in the sense of like the level of following and like people paying attention to this guy. Like we just don't see it because it's not in our purview. But man, like the UFC has been trying to unlock, maybe not even trying. They've kind of been like leaving the Japanese market alone for 31 years. There's been intermittent moments where they're like, hey, we'll try to do something here. But for the most part, they've kind of just acquiesced that to Pride or Ryzen or whoever, ends up being the dominant scene over promotion in the scene over there. If Kai Asakura comes in here and captures a UFC title, and all of a sudden that is the guy who was sort of your first Japanese champion ever in 31 years, I think the ceiling for what that could become for the UFC and the way that market could open up is immense. And really, I feel like we don't begin to fathom what that could mean for the sport, for the UFC, for all of it. So like that fight to me was incredibly difficult to pick because there is so much riding on the line in this fight that it almost is flying under the radar.
That historical context, which still stands to this day. I remember doing a feature for Fight Magazine back in the day that was uh, how Japanese fighters have fared basically when they come over on U.S. soil and fight in the UFC, and it was atrocious. Like their record was horrible. Like this is, and even not even just there, but just Yushin Okami, who got a title shot against Anderson Silva at UFC 134. You had guys like Hetsu Hayoki, remember the Iron Broom, and Yurushitani and the Fireball Kid. Like you could go down the list of guys
Kawajiri, Kid Yamamoto.
Yeah,
like how many dudes. Guys came in here at the
and all of them
moment?
had some. Yeah, they had all this hype or like momentum, and somehow it just did not get over the hump. And I feel like this would be the weird one, right? Because he hasn't been in the UFC's flyweight division. If he comes over here, pulls off this upset, and I guess if you want to call it an upset, like like you're saying, like maybe people just aren't onto his prowess. But if he comes in here and wins it and becomes the first Japanese champion, I do feel like you're going to see like a kind of crazy aftermath with that, because it's been a long time. People aren't acknowledging how big of a deal it is. But I agree with you. I think it's a huge deal. 31 years, and there's been Japanese fighters sprinkled throughout the whole time, and we've never had a Japanese champion. So that is a big deal.
I mean, it's not even like UFC specific either, right? Because Ben Folks wrote a tremendous piece as well this week. Lots of good stuff on Uncrowned, by the way. Great website. You should check it out. He wrote a tremendous piece on just like the history of Japanese fighters overall coming out west and just trying to succeed. And a big part of that was Shinya Aoki. If you remember back in the Strikeforce days, Shinya Aoki at that point in time was probably considered a top 3 non-UFC fighter in the world. Like he was on an absolute tear out in Japan, and he comes over and fights Gilbert Melendez in Strikeforce. And Aoki himself had a great quote about this at the time of like, this means a lot for my country. If I come out here and lose, Japanese MMA is essentially going to become another colony of the United States. And obviously there's some tongue in cheek there to it, but like he wasn't wrong in some sense either. Right. And that wasn't like, he didn't perform well in that fight. He never really found success out west here. It's just, there's a long lineage of all these great Japanese fighters just really failing to make it in the Western, skill set, Western rule set, just Western promotion set. It's very, I don't know, like Japan has such like a long lineage of mixed martial arts and martial arts history. It's not something you would expect, but I think the idea of what this could be is very cool.
Yeah, I feel like if he wins, it's going to be dramatic too. Like we've seen all of the highlight reels. The UFC have done a great job of kind of putting that together, letting the fans know what we're about to witness with this guy.
He's not a boring fighter.
No, but at the same time, when you so heavily put that weight on his striking prowess, you can clearly see what Pantoja can do to this guy. Like he knows how to cook dudes. Like he is so good at timing takedowns. He is so good at wearing people out. As we said before, Asakura hasn't made this weight in a very, very long time. We know how draining weight cuts can be. I just feel as though like there's part of Pantoja watching this going, this is an ideal situation for me in many ways. Like this guy, obviously very tall. I think that the height advantage that Asakura has, although it helps him in the striking, I think it gives Pantoja a lot more room to get underneath and take him down as well, which I think we're definitely going to see at some point.
It's a strange thing, by the way. Like Pantoja now fighting for the second time a kind of left field contender, because he had Steve Erceg, right? Last time he kind of had 3 fights, and then he fights him in. He kind of gets thrust into a main event in Brazil. Really showcased well. I think he's got that dog, and we were talking in our little round table that we did. But it seems to mean more to a guy like that. It's just there's something inside of him, and I remember the whole the thing with his father, and that it just kind of glimpse into his emotional motivations and stuff like that. It means a lot to him, and I feel like when he kind of taps into that, he's a savage in there, man. So I think even though it's a weird setup, like he's fighting Erceg, now he's fighting a newcomer to the UFC. It's like nothing like you'd see anywhere else in the UFC. I think that this is it's kind of a crazy eye-opening time for Pantoja, and for him to really distinguish himself.
But also like the peripheral sense of this too is very interesting to me, because Pantoja very much seems like he understands this is no walkover. Like he understands sort of like what he's up against here, and Drake detailed in his piece like he has put together a veritable Avengers squad out there at ATT of former Asakura opponents essentially to help him prepare for this whole entire camp. Kyoji Horiguchi, Manel Kopp, And I believe there was one more as well, Yuki Motoya. Like 3 dudes who have fought Kai very recently were
A couple of
helping
them have beat him too, so that's
yeah,
that's
both
helpful.
Manel and Horiguchi have beaten him recently. So it's like the level of preparation and sort of just like access almost they have to his game is just I'm so fascinated by this fight. It is such a difficult fight for me to pick, but it feels like the stakes are really there.
I gotta say, you've also picked exactly like Chuck.
Smart
Very
man.
boring picks, I'd call them. That's just me. That's just me. All of the favorites again. Al-Shatti
No,
9
but
and
not
3.
last time. The last time I had a couple of underdogs, they just
Yeah, you
happened to come
did.
through. Yeah.
All right.
This
Okay.
time
I'll
it
give
is
you.
the favorites. I did acknowledge that. I was looking, I was like,
Did we not praise you enough, Chuck? Did we not like tell you
I
how
just kind
great
of
you
I kind
are
of
and
want
how
to go
unbelievable
back
this was?
one more lap around. Like, so some of my process when I'm thinking, no, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, guys.
So Al-Shatti's 9 and 3, right? So he
Not
can
bad.
catch. He can catch.
I was trying to be fun with it too. Like my first event, I kind of did some like vibe off the wall picks because I was just trying to be different. And as soon as we all decided like we're doing records, it's like, okay, well,
Sean, we've been through this rodeo before. We used to do the locks with the man of the myth and all that, and I think I batted 1,000. I'm pretty sure.
yeah, when you're picking like Valentina, oh my lock, it's Valentina Shevchenko to beat Jessica I. Like, hey, great.
She did beat her. Go look it up.
Yes,
Pull up the
did.
wick.
2 times I was on that show, he did pick the most obvious favorites every single time. Like
Amanda Nunes is
1,000
gonna
to
do
1.
it again.
Yeah. So look, you have got Pantoja, Rakhmonov, Gan, Mitchell, Landwehr. Now I've opened myself up. I've picked 2 underdogs. I've picked Kai Asakura. I've picked Doohoo Choi. But if they come true, lads, that means me and Chuck will be head to head. That's what I think is going to happen here. That is what I think is going to happen here. Connor Burke's also holding second place with me. He's at 10 and 2. Pantoja, Rakhmonov, Gan, Gracie. Sorry, GC. And Landwehr.
I think the last time Chrome Gracie fought, Hoist was fighting alongside him, like in a UFC 1, wasn't it?
That's it, man. Those Gracies, huh? They
So
are
I guess this sort of like because this is the last pay-per-view of the year. We're not going to have another pick series until January, until 2025. I guess this is sort of for the title for the year.
Yeah.
We started late, but like we obviously
should have.
reset
Why didn't we throw in the one we would have gotten some clear, I think, balance on would have been the Evolov fight, right? Don't you think some people would have went Sterling, and so that would have been fun to kind of throw that one in.
You should have said something a couple days ago.
Was it a buck short and a day late? You know.
Well, lads, before we move on, I just want to have a quick word from our partners, Averon. And let me tell you, I have visited ArielHelwani's house. And I have seen he has this stuff everywhere, man. He is into this working out stuff. I'm gonna eventually get into it myself too. This exercise thing everyone's talking about. But Averon is absolutely quality.
Who we kidding? You're a unit, man. I've seen you in person.
But if you've seen the shows during the week, have you seen these competitions the lads are doing? They're absolutely incredible. The GoPro on the bike, I'm absolutely loving it. So with Averon, your workout routine shouldn't feel like a grind. That's why Averon makes exercise more fun and easier to stick to using gamification. That means you can actually play video games or watch different apps while you are using these machines. It's fantastic. Powered by their award-winning Averon World software and paired with industry-leading hardware, Averon's rower, bike, and treadmill deliver some of the most fun and effective workouts ever. Jump into a session, and before you know it, you're locked in, competing head to head, racing against the clock, or chasing your personal best. Averon's got everything from games and challenges to virtual rides, on demand classes, and the most streaming options out there. Sweat it out, get competitive, and look forward to the next cardio day. Right now, you can head over to averonactive.com/uncrowned and get an extra $50 off. That is quite a deal, my friends. That's AVIRON active.com/uncrowned to end boring workouts. I need to get over there.
New Year's coming up, man. This is the right time for that.
I'm turning into quite a fatty, and I need some Averon in my life. I will tell you that much, my friends.
Can you still put your leg behind your head?
I can't, man. The weight, like that was 15 kilos ago, so about 35 pounds ago. It's not happening anymore.
What are you talking about? I must have missed something.
And if I do that, right, the rig the way it is here now, the great Andy has helped me rig this place out to make myself not look so translucent due to this Irish skin. But if I try to do that now, I'm just going to basically kick over my whole set. So I'm not going to do that right now. We've got Elaine's lovely advent calendar she's made me here in the background too, which has been fantastic. So I'll be opening them at some point. I'm actually opened the one today already, unfortunately.
What'd you get?
I got a stress ball because I'm so stressed out all the time. I've got a little basketball hoop. I've got a bit of lip balm. I got these Santa Claus chocolates. Can we see these? Look at
Oh,
those.
look at that.
What else did I get? I got a face mask because you can't look this good by doing nothing, boys. You got to moisturize. You got to make sure those pores can breathe. I've gone off on a tangent. Let's get back to these fights. I wanted to know
real quick before we get to our next one.
Yes.
Again, coming from the chat, I can't get over this, and I need opinions. Pat Dorgan saying Shaheen is a Dylan Dennis lookalike, and I can't get past it. I've never heard that in my life. Do I look like Dylan Dennis?
Thank you. Who said that? See, this is one of those there's unspoken weird elephants in the room for a long time, man.
I feel mildly insulted. And I don't
he
like
is offended. I can see he is angry, dude. Al-Shatti is pissed.
I've gotten a lot. I've gotten like Junior Dos Santos. I've gotten other ones, and it's like,
that's
not
Santos
like
is
super. That's not flattering, but whatever.
I don't see it.
But Dylan, I've never heard that.
He's very upset with Dylan. He is very upset with that.
Shoot me.
I've actually seen. I have been both around Al-Shatti in person and Dennis in person. Nothing like each other. In fact, Al-Shatti's a lot taller than Dennis and more ripped. To be fair, more ripped. And
yeah,
what I will say is
he is ripped.
Way cooler. Al-Shatti way cooler person.
I've got that. That's like that Landwehr thing. I'm like, it's 50-50 on that one. But yeah, it's like I got the rest is.
I wanted to know, boys, did you see the moment that took over MMA internet yesterday? It starred one of your Danbury locals, Chuck Mindenhall, the great Alex Pereira and Jamahal Hill. The internet was ablaze last night with this. Offering the gloves. Jamahal later did a video on his channel and he was kind of saying, well, I don't want to wear the gloves. But this isn't what this is about. I wanted to throw down right there. We'll get your reaction to this in a second, Al-Shatti, all right? My God. A lot of people seem to think it's a bad look for Jamahal Hill. I don't. I'm open to interpretation, but Al-Shatti, you seem to feel very strongly about this.
You don't think it's a bad look for Jamahal Hill?
In the interest of conversation, I don't think it's a bad look. I don't know how I feel about it. How do you feel?
No, I'm not going to gloss past it. I want to hear your explanation.
Yeah, it's terrible. Terrible. Because you're obviously walking over to the guy. It looks like Pereira is like, oh, how's it going, man? How are you?
Yeah, he
is. Then there's an element of aggression put in there by Hill. So Pereira very casually throws these gloves at him. And then suddenly the dynamic shifted, I would say. And I'm just basing off this video. I looked at the reaction online and it was a big L for Jamahal in terms of how the people reacted to this. I was just trying to set Al-Shatti up because I've been doing that throughout the show. If you haven't noticed, I just keep on throwing him the turd and going, here you go.
Sign of a good host. Sign of a good host.
I wanted to do it again. But bad look, I'd say. I listened to Jamahal's comments on air. Jordan sent them to me last night. He had a few things to say about it. Obviously, he was saying that he said we don't need gloves for this. And then it was kind of like we should get, I don't know if he was saying we should get paid for this as well. Your reaction anyway, Al-Shatti, now that I have bought my soul.
When you're like that guy, right? When you're the guy who's sort of been keeping this going, stoking this fire repeatedly, and then you are the one who starts this interaction by essentially walking over to him and being like, it ain't Twitter anymore, right? Or like whatever it was. It was something about like, this isn't Twitter.
That's right, yes.
What are you doing? Just genuinely, like what was the goal there? Right? Because if the goal is to like start a thing, you succeeded. But then if you're not going to follow through with the thing, you should have never started the thing, because Alex is going to follow through with the thing. Like Alex has already beaten you, my guy. If you and I have played, 20 games of Street Fighter, and I'm 20-0 against you, which I would be regardless. Like, and you're coming at me, you're coming at me talking noise. I'm gonna be like, all right, let's just do it again. I just beat you. I don't care. I'll do it again. It's just like the game plan from the outset was very baffling to me, but this is not like a first time thing for Jamahal, right? Like his public relations, strategy. It's very puzzling to me.
Yeah, the place is going crazy on that last knockout, and he's over there yawning. When I'm like, dude, there's tone deaf, and then there's like this other level of whatever the hell he's doing right now. It's if I could really attribute a strategic value to what he's doing. You'd be like, well, sure, you should plant the seeds that this fight needs to happen, but I don't feel like it's hitting like that because I feel like he just looks like kind of he's hanging on to something that's not near. Like it's really not in the discussion. People really aren't pining for this. You know what I mean? And I don't even feel like he kind of generated that kind of heat. So I think that's part of it. You know, it's just it's a bad look just because it feels like he's offbeat from whatever the popular consensus is as to what's happening right now in that division. It doesn't feel like Jamahal actually should be in that position.
Yeah, it just feels like when I was watching it, it was like it just feels like as much as Pereira wins, this guy is losing all the time, right? We keep on talking about how Pereira keeps on having these effortless wins, and that's another one of them. Like he didn't actually do a whole lot there, right? Like he's training, and this guy comes over, and he's like, it's nearly like he's like, oh, perfect. Here's the gloves. We can.
The perfect reaction, wasn't it?
You know,
it's like, come on, you wanna do it? Let's do it.
I love it. He just so casually too.
I know.
Just like doesn't even throw the gloves. He just kind of like dumps them onto him. Just like, all right, bro, all right, let's hear it. We're literally in the spot where we can do something about this.
Yeah, it just, and look, nobody.
He's terrifying too, man. I've seen him over at Glover's. Like I've seen him training over at Glover's. I mean, the dude doesn't play around. I'm like, everything is like, he means it. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't know. But I love his attitude. I think that's why he gets the W, right? Like it's just his attitude is always like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's do it.
Yeah.
It's just the forethought. There's no forethought in this, man. Like again, what was the best case scenario? If this was your game plan, like I'm gonna go here, start noise, but I'm not gonna follow through on it if anything does happen. Like, what's the best case scenario for you? You're just gonna kind of come out looking silly. Like 6 months ago or 4 months ago or whenever it was, like this man made you like for a forever meme with that knockout and then the following ensuing reaction. And then like ever since then, it's just like everything we've seen from him, just like, oh man, he wouldn't do it again. It was a fluke. Like I'd get him next time. And it's like, there's no demand for this fight. No one's out here calling for Hill versus Alex Pereira too. And especially not now. Like the idea that like, oh, all press is good press. And, you know, now you're keeping your name in the headlines with this guy. Like, I don't know. Is anybody more interested in that rematch now than they were yesterday?
No. I wouldn't be surprised if Nevada issues a 6-month suspension for knockout, even though he didn't even throw a punch this time.
Jesus Christ. That's brilliant. Yeah, and it's also like, you know, like I can remember before Pereira got like he debuted in the UFC, there was videos of the sparring footage going around all the time. And as you said, Chuck, like the way he goes at dudes, you even see him showing up in random schools, right? This guy's traveling the world. We've seen all these airport receptions he gets, everything like that. And he'll just match the level of intensity that's brought to him. And it doesn't seem to bother him if the guy is like 20 years of age or whatever. He's like, oh, you got me with a good one. We are now fighting. And the switch that goes off in him, you see it. Like you can see it. He goes into like kill mode during sparring sessions. Absolutely crazy.
Or one of those idiots who's like, hey, kick me with your full force. He's like, okay.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. But what I was trying to get to is like, even if he had one of those sparring sessions with Jamahal Hill and he wrecked him again, I still don't think he could win more than he won just off of this footage. That's my, like, I think it's too perfect, right? Everything is just perfect. This guy does.
Get it. I just don't get it. Like, do you think Alex is not going to call your bluff? Like, if this is a bluff, do you think he's not going to? Like, obviously he's going to.
I mean, everybody within like a weight class either way wants to fight Alex Pereira. Or if you want to, like, you know, if you want to, you just want to be in the biggest fight, which would be against Alex Pereira. So it just feels like out of all of those that you could circle that could potentially fight Alex Pereira right now, I'm not even sure Jamahal would be in the top 10, maybe. I mean, it's just like, I'm not even sure I would pick.
You could have gone 20. 10. You could have gone 20.
Could have gone 20, maybe. I don't know. I'd have to really look at that. But yes, that's my point. So it just feels like it's a kind of a forced thing.
Yes. Well, look, lads, 310 just around the corner. An absolute pleasure to have you guys on the Craic again. I love you both very, very much. And big thank you to our great sponsors, NordVPN and Averon. We had a great time with that today. Also tomorrow, make sure you're here on this channel because there will be a watch along. There will be a post-fight show, Uncrowned, and this channel, the ArielHelwani Show, going to keep on bringing you those hits. Thank you again, boys. I love you very much. Thank you to Oscar Losef. Thank you to On Air Jordan. Thank you to Mysterious Frank. Thank you to everybody. We will see you at UFC 310 with the lads, with the watch along, and then we're going to be reacting to it afterwards. We'll see you tomorrow. Lots of love. Mwah.